Hi everyone, Matt Fitzgerald here with my nutrition advisor. I'm doing an interview with Dr. Leslie Korn as a part of our business of natural health entrepreneurs. So, Dr. Korn, welcome. Oh, we're very happy to have you.
Very happy to be here, Matt.
And I'll give a brief introduction about you. Dr. Korn is a Harvard Medical School trained behavioral medicine doctor and natural medicine clinician. She specializes in nutrition for mental health and cognitive performance and is a publisher, author of 7 books. In addition to writing books, Dr. Korn has been in private practice for over 40 years. She offers keynotes, continuing education trainings, and retreats along with free and paid courses. She is also a university professor. Dr. Korn has a very unique background. She lived in the jungles of Mexico for over 25 years, where she developed her passion for natural medicine. She is passionate about her nonprofit, which is called the Center for Traditional Medicine, which she founded in 1977 and brought into the Center for World Indigenous Studies in 1994. So, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And for those of you who are joining this series for the first time, the group really focuses on the business topics of how you became a natural health entrepreneur. So let's just start off. You obviously have a pretty incredible background that started in the jungles of Mexico. So can you? I like hearing the origin story of how people began.
Well, thank you. And it was a fun origin. I was traveling. I was looking for the meaning in life at a very young age and had tired of the university as an undergraduate and decided to go off on an adventure. And that adventure took me to the jungle of Mexico where there were no roads, no electricity, no doctors, no running water. It was quite rural, and I fell in love with it and I stayed. And in the process of staying, I was lucky enough to get sick with absolutely everything there was to get sick with or from. And during that process, I was learning and healing from the local women, the indigenous healers, the curanderas, the herbalists. And when there's no doctor and no one that you're used to going to, you learn from who's there. And their medicine was perfect. And I learned not only how to heal naturally, but how to use the mind, how to use meditation and yoga, but most importantly, medicinal plants and foods for healing. And that was the start of my career, really. It was quite organic.
That's great. So, for the user, so we always do a little pre-interview, so I get to know who I'm talking to beforehand, and at the end I realize that you've moved everywhere since then, and then I realize at the end that you're back in Mexico. So you're actually talking to us from Mexico, right?
I am. I am. I've been lucky to spend, most of my adult life living in Mexico, though, as you know, I've spent some time living in the jungle of Boston and working there also.
Yeah. Yeah, we met in Seattle at a no, sorry, Portland at a nutrition conference. So it was funny when you said, "Oh, I'm in Mexico," and I thought, "Oh, that's not very common that I interview someone outside of the country." Um, so you lived in Mexico for a while, and then you left to go get a master's degree, right? And became a professor
Mhm.
at Lesley. Can you just tell us about your transition of leaving Mexico and what you went to go do?
Yeah, during my time in Mexico, I was fortunate enough to start a health center. I'd had early experience as a feminist in Boston in my teen years, really. So I was very interested in women's health and reproductive rights. And so I brought that into my work as I was learning and healing with women in the jungle. And together we started a natural medicine center. And I started that in 1977. 1978, and we did all kinds of natural and traditional, meaning indigenous forms of medicine. However, after 10 years, I felt like I needed more formal training. I'd hit the wall in what I'd learned on my own and what I knew. And so I went back, I did a master's in cross cultural health psychology first at Lesley University, spent a year there, and then went back to Mexico for a few years, then went back and did a master's in public health at Harvard. And I was interested in all things midwifery and medicinal plants, and I was surrounded by molecular biologists and vaccinators. And so I learned a lot. I learned a lot about how to speak multiple languages. And I don't mean English and Spanish or German. I mean the language of different clinicians. And one thing that I tell my students is it's very important for us to learn the other's language so we can find ways to interpret what we do for them. And so that was my first entree back into graduate school. And from there, I went on and did a clinical fellowship at the medical school in psychiatry because my work, while it had begun in food and plants and ethnobotany, and I was also practicing cranial sacral work and hearing the stories of trauma that our clients have to tell. Let's face it, most of us have experienced some kind of trauma. It's quite rampant and it underlies so much of the mind body symptoms that we see, whether we're a nutritional therapist, a psychotherapist, a body worker, a physician, or a nurse. It doesn't matter. That's who we're seeing. And so when I was listening to the stories of my patients, I felt like I needed even more training to understand the meaning. And so that took me into the study of psychology. And I was at the medical school for a couple of years and then hightailed it back to Mexico where I really wanted to be.
So, when we had talked earlier, you had mentioned about a nutritional consulting business you started, and I thought it was very interesting how it got started. So, you were a professor at Lesley University when the government approached you with funding to create a nutrition program. Can you tell us about this?
Yes, indeed. And just for clarification, I was an adjunct professor at Lesley. I taught, they were very innovative and they still remain innovative in mind body medicine. And so I was teaching holistic counseling there. And I was approached by the Massachusetts Housing Finance Agency and the Federal Housing and Urban Development because they were very interested in innovative ways to reduce the addictions and violence arising out of the addictions in a lot of the low and middle income housing developments that they were building throughout not only urban Boston, but also rural Massachusetts. And so they approached me about developing a variety of programs, wellness programs, that included nutritional therapies and eating right to feel right. We did teen esteem programs. We did intergenerational photography programs. We did a variety of health and wellness programs in 8 different languages for the feds and the state for this purpose. And this was a great way for me to blend my interest in natural medicine and nutrition and self care with a kind of mission for changing public health and bringing these ideas to people who don't always have access to them and can't always afford them as well.
So I want to get into a little bit of the business side of this because I think if most entrepreneurs were approached by the government with funding and said, "Hey, help create a program for us," at least if it were me, I'd probably write like some big manual, right, and hand off the manual, and maybe get paid a little a little bit of money to hand off a manual. Like that's what I would have done. But that's not what you. I mean, you might have done that, but you did a whole lot more. So how did you what'd you end up doing to actually turn this into a full-on nutritional consulting business?
Well, I did develop manuals and develop programs for our clients that we were serving, but I love to teach. And I think the best way we know about whether a program works, let's say in nutritional wellness, is by actually doing it and getting the response from the clients, whether they're 14 or 84. And so I began the program by actually teaching it and working out the kinks. Was this idea on paper actually feasible and did it engage people? We developed little cooking classes too, how to cook on a low, not too much money on with people with a small budget, but that was healthy. And the other piece that I really brought from my work in Mexico was the role of culture and food. We all come from different cultures and different ethnic heritages. And I think we really love to celebrate our identities and share those identities through foods as well. And so we use that as a major theme. Excuse me. Now, from there, I was able to then hire 10 teaching consultants who all spoke different languages. And then I was able to pay them a portion of what I was paid to develop some of these ideas in their own language and adjust them according to ethnic interest also. And we ran that program for 10 years. And indeed, I joked with you, Matt, because I joked with you about this idea of object constancy. The idea that if, for many people, if you're not in the same room with them, you're not there at all. Excuse me. And so I ran that program as a big consulting firm in Boston. I ended up moving. I moved away and still ran that program, and no one knew I moved. Now, today we think, oh, well, that's quaint. We do that all the time. But in those days, people didn't work virtually and people didn't work at a distance. And so I got to test out the challenges, certainly, of supervising and running a business at a distance. And I do think that remains a challenge for those of us who work at a distance. So I really learned a lot about the business, the technology, and how to stay connected with people, at least the last few years when we were at a distance. Now, this program really sat side by side with my clinical practice. And I've always had a sense in my work, even from my early days in the jungle, working with very poor people, that my program, and we ended up running a variety of education programs in the jungle too, where people came from all over the world to study, clinicians who were interested in the rural experience, people who wanted to learn natural medicine, but we also turned it into a volunteer program where physicians and nurses, nutritional therapists came, and part of their time there, they donated their expertise to people in the village and surrounding villages. So we used a model of running well paid courses to then support our pro bono work. And that's a theme that I've carried on throughout my career. We're always going to want to do heartfelt, passionate work with people and for communities that may not have the funds to pay us. And so I developed a lucrative private practice where people with the funds to pay or the funds to pay as donations into our nonprofit to then support the passion, mission driven work of supporting people with health and wellness and nutrition, and including supplements, by the way, that we had donated from a variety of corporations, so that we could really balance out the need for social responsibility in reaching a wide variety of people.
That's great. Yeah, the last interview I had was an author of a book, and we're going to get into your books in a second. But she turned her book into basically a consulting practice, and I'm a business guy, right? None of you health entrepreneurs think about it in terms of a business, or not many do, or they don't aim
That's
for it
right.
that way. But when I think about you could have just created a manual and handed it off, and that would have been easy. If you really think about the business, if you get asked to write a book or you get asked to create a manual or something, you need to think about how else can I make money off of this? And here's the thing, you could think about it a different way. If there's no other way to make money off of it, you can't really expand the idea, you can't grow it. And so you hired 10 different people who went out there and taught this. So number one, it's bringing in it's bringing in more revenue to you. But number two, even if you say, oh, I don't care about money, well, now you got 10 people out there teaching the manual, because what good is your manual if you write it and no one reads it, right?
Exactly.
Now,
Yeah.
what good is it if you hire 10 people to go out there into the community and teach it? It's very valuable, right? So you could have the best manual in the world, but if no one reads it, it's the worst. I mean, it doesn't even matter. So it's smart from a business sense, and it's smart from, making an impact sense. And then for you, because I know you're very passionate about your nonprofits, you use this as a revenue source to help drive, some of your true passions around the nonprofit. So it's a great thing that you've done.
Well,
Let's
thank you.
Yeah.
I haven't always thought of myself as really an extraordinary businesswoman, far from it. I've actually launched a number of students who trained with me who became far better at business than I. I had a private practice in Boston. I had a private practice in Olympia, Washington. I ran a health center for 25 years in rural Mexico. And one would say, stay where you are. I was in Boston practicing just up until the big revolution in integrative healthcare. When I began, people didn't even use the word stress. Can you imagine that? That's how
Mhm.
long ago it was. We were doing wheatgrass then too, but it really didn't launch into the huge business it is today. And so I have to say that I don't think of myself as the greatest businesswoman, but I've always found a way to be creative around making enough money, at the same time not stopping in not staying put for the sake of business, but using my creative energies to follow my passions with the belief that I will find the resources out there to support the work. Now, I don't create illusions about that. It's often led to, as you know, as an entrepreneur, you often work 7 hours a week. 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. You work quite a bit to do that. And when I'm counseling my students who want to go into the careers that we're in terms of nutrition, I say you have to know yourself. Do you want to sit back and get a salary, or and stop your workday at the 5 o'clock and be done with it, or do you want to launch something that's a reflection of your own work? And I think people are different, and you have to identify what kind of person you are. So when you ask me about teaching at Lesley, yes, I've always taken positions teaching at universities, not only because I love to teach and love to share my knowledge and love to push the conventional norms a little bit into thinking a bit more innovatively and more broadly. So that's the mission, but clearly to get a solid income. So while I'm experimenting with some of these other innovative ideas that are pushing the envelope, I at least have some beans to put in my plate.
Yeah, definitely. And it's what it takes. I mean, we all need it, and that's how you get your message out to more people. So it's great. So you have written 7 books, and you have a new book that was just released called The Good Mood Kitchen. And for those of you watching, if you're on the Facebook post, I have a link that will take you to all of her books, so you can check them out. But can you tell us a little bit about this new book, The Good Mood Kitchen?
The Good Mood Kitchen is just what it says. It's about eating right to have a good mood. It's about eating right, not only for good physical health, but good mental health. And I think oftentimes we haven't gotten the message that our mental health, our brain, mind, and body is dependent upon getting good nutrients and a good ratio of those nutrients and understanding how we are all individuals. So it's very much rooted in the idea of bio individuality, that what's right for me may not be right for you. And so rather than it being a one stop shop type of nutrition program, it really provides a lot of breadth to understanding who am I and what does my brain need to stay healthy and to eat well. So it's a combination of a health book, how to improve your mood, and specifically if you deal with depression, anxiety, insomnia, bipolar, ADHD, a questionable diagnosis, by the way, PTSD, which is certainly my main area of focus as a traumatologist. I also provide recipes, very simple, because what I find when I travel the country teaching is we're divided. There are people who cook and prepare food and people who don't. And so I really wanted to reach both the people who are already preparing their own food, but also reach out to people who may feel I don't have enough time or I don't really know where to start, and really develop some recipes that are also easy to make and easy to take to work, easy to make for a family as a whole. So
Great.
that's a little bit about what the book's about.
Yeah, that's exciting, and it just launched like maybe a week or two ago, right? Is when it was
It's still in
released.
the pre-launch pricing, so you'll pay less for it now. So if you're interested, get it now because it'll go up when it officially launches on September 12th. Yeah,
Yeah, and
it's
that's
on
when you're doing the
Amazon.
big PR releases starting then.
Yes.
So with 7 books launched, I had asked you before, wow, so have you made a lot of money then? I mean, you have 7 books and these are not, I mean, they're published by big publishers. So I asked you, well, you probably made a lot of money on your books. What'd you say to that?
Zip. You don't make money on books unless unless 10,000 or 20,000, 50,000 people buy them. But I've tried writing books both ways and I've learned a lot. And so it's a good lesson. I have both self-published. One of the first books I wrote was Preventing and Treating Diabetes the Native Way. And I co-wrote that with my husband, Dr. Rudolph Reeser. And it's based on a natural, nutritional, and herbal approach to diabetes prevention that's based in the knowledge of Pacific Northwest Indigenous peoples. And we decided that actually came out of courses that we taught, 3-day revitalization courses we do with tribal communities all over the country. And we decided, let's turn this into a book. And let's also make it available on Kindle, for example. And we self published it. But the challenge is when you're a content person, when you're an idea person, you're not always a marketing person. You don't have the time to market. Maybe you don't have the money to pay a marketing and PR machine, and a book needs PR. And so we've done okay, but it's one of those projects of passion. It's not a project that fills the pockets, as it were. Now we're getting ready to redo that book in the form of an online course where people can hear audio and video because now we're making it relevant to younger people who want to watch and listen more than they want to sit and hold a book. So in terms of business, we've tried to keep current, but you don't make a lot of money on books. Now, subsequent books, I went with publishers. I was actually approached by a publisher, and I launched my first clinical textbook on the treatment of trauma called Rhythms of Recovery. And I included chapters on nutrition, botanicals, and also entheogens, the use of what we used to call psychedelics for the treatment of PTSD. So it's a very radical book that integrates psychotherapy along with body work and understanding touch and nutrition, entheogens, and herbal medicine, as well as detoxification from both a scientific point of view and a clinical point of view. However, what I learned is even when you go with conventional New York publishers, they differ amongst themselves. They apply different marketing funds to market your book. And so the next book that I did, called Nutrition Essentials for Mental Health, I was approached by another publisher to write for them. And this is a clinical book that I wrote for people who practice in the field who were not trained in nutrition but want to integrate nutrition. Mental health practitioners, nurses, even doctors who are not trained in nutrition but want a broad experience of understanding, how do I integrate this and what do we know about nutrition for mental health? They did a beautiful job marketing that book and it sold well. But as an author, you still don't make a lot of money writing books. Now, if everyone goes out and buys the Good Mood Kitchen, I might get, put some handcrafted sausage in my beans on my plate too. But, one improves. And just one final thing about the business of writing. The benefits of writing also establish your expertise. You may be knowing what you're talking about, but you may not reach as large an audience. And so when you publish a book, you may not make money from the book, but people get to know you. They invite you to do keynotes, as I do now. They pay you more when you do keynotes than you used to be paid because you've got an important book that's out, for example, and or people might ask you to teach. So the book in and of itself may not bring the dollars in, but it leads to other opportunities. And I think that's central in our work in nutritional therapy and in natural medicine entrepreneurship, that we think about the whole picture of what we're doing, what we love, what brings in the money, and what's going to lead to opportunities.
Yeah, in marketing, there's a term called funnel marketing, right? If you think of a funnel where you got a wide top and it kind of narrows, kind of what you're saying is the book is kind of the top of the funnel. It's where you reach a lot of people. This, like if you see cheesy ads on TV, it's like free plus shipping, right? Because they're just trying to get as many people into the top of the funnel as possible, right? And then, once they've committed to you a little bit and you've established some sort of authority or trust, then you might be able to sell them on a consulting thing or get requested for keynotes or get them to sign up to a course, which is really how you're making the money. But it's a big concept, in marketing to know your funnel, because if you just randomly try to go out of the gate trying to sell some like $1,000 consulting sessions to somebody who's never heard of you, it's never going to happen, because you're bringing that person, you're trying to get that person to the bottom of your funnel. So it totally makes sense how the book, of course, it's serving as a way for you to create credibility, but it's also bringing a whole bunch of people into the top of your funnel. That would be the market business perspective of that.
Absolutely. And as a clinician, as a content provider, now I've been asked to write yet another book. I don't have time to do that. I want to know about it. I want someone to educate me, like you. What is a funnel and how does this work? But then I want to have enough funds to pay someone to advise me in a way that's also congruent with my integrity, that really feels right to me, that says, hey, I think we could reach more people, not only get your product out, but get your message out and really help more people. And as someone like me, that's where I need someone to bring that expertise to what I do, because you can't do it all.
Right, right. And another thing that you had brought up last time we talked that I wanted to bring up, and going to the top of the funnel, right? Because you write a book, if you write a book and no one reads it, then who cares? But you have hired a publicist. So the question that I had asked you before is, you basically had told me, hey, we need to do this interview at the end of August because my September is totally packed. I'm on radio, I'm on everything, right? I'm being interviewed by everyone in September. So let's do this in August. So it's August 30th right now. But I asked you a question like, well, how do you get interviewed? I mean, like, I would love to be interviewed about my product, and how do you do it? And you mentioned that you had hired a publicist who helps with that. Can you tell us, like, how'd you
Yes.
hire a
Well,
publicist? And
I learned, just like we all learn. We learn by, like you say, you write a book and then you go, why isn't anyone writing this? It's the best thing since gluten-free bread, you know? And then you learn how it's done and what makes a bestseller. Well, what makes a bestseller, the only thing that makes a bestseller is that 10,000 books are sold and it hits the New York Times bestseller list. That's the criteria. It could be the crappiest book in the world, but and they've even caught authors buying 10,000 books and having it reach the bestseller list. So there's been some scams about that too. So what I realized when I was looking at books out there, that I thought, these are great books. And then I'd look at books that I thought, boy, I have to read the whole book to get one piece of information that's really pithy in here. How did they get it to be a bestseller? And then I learned that one needs to have a publicist who is connected with the people who can get you TV spots, get you radio spots. You can't do cold calls to these places. You need that specialist in the field who's built years of connections, who then will make an entree for you. And that's what has happened for me. It's a combination of having a good product, because you can't just hire anyone to do this, because I think they will often not hire people who meaning they won't take on people who self-publish. That's rare. And so it has to be the combination of having a good book, having a book that's hit the right timing. And I think we're finally, thank goodness, getting to a place where people are paying attention to what they eat is going to affect their mood. I call it mood follows food.
Hmm.
And then having the right people to make the right connections, and in this case whether it's print media or radio interviews. And the jury is still out, Matt. I will let you know how that goes.
Well,
But
it's
so
exciting to
far
me
I've got
because
lots of bookings.
yeah, I would say because with my nutrition advisor, it's always been like, oh, how do we get the message across? And it's like, oh, it'd be really nice if someone would interview us about it, right? It'd be really nice, but I don't have a clue. But it was very interesting to hear you talk about books, and it's like, okay, the book helps establish the credibility. We need people to read it, so I go through a publisher, I hire a publicist. Now I'm being interviewed all these places, which starts to command more authority, which helps you even further be an expert in your field. And then that helps you get into doing keynote speeches, which is kind of a next topic, right? So you're also a keynote speaker. What do you speak about, and who do you speak to?
Sure. And let me just say one thing, because when I met you, I loved your product, and I met you at this conference, and I tend to avoid vendor tables because I don't like the hype. But you and your partner were so laid back, and yet right away you gave me something to chew on, basically, and we just connected. So there was that interpersonal connection, and then I tasted your product and loved it, and then I've been referring all my clients to it since. I put it on my website. But then after we talked, I thought, I also have a forum to support you because I love what you do and what you make. And I publish on Psychology Today blog on integrative medicine, and so I don't know if you saw it, but I
Yeah.
wrote recently a blog about your work and gave a recipe for my book, and then talked about the value of what you do, because I've got clients who don't even have time to make a smoothie from scratch. They want something like your packets to put into a blender or into a jar and quickly mix up. And so I think there's also that mutual reciprocal connections that we make across our various disciplines.
Yeah.
Um, so I just wanted to mention that because I think that's also how we get word out. I've got about 3,000 readers on that Psychology Today blog, and
Wow.
hopefully it'll grow too. Um,
Yeah. Well, it's
so
exciting. Just
keynotes.
getting referenced on Psychology Today for anyone who knows SEO, that helps my SEO out too, right? So not only do I get
Excellent.
exposure, but my website then gains some credibility, which then helps me reach more people. So it was awesome seeing that up. And we posted on our social media too and said, "Hey, look, we're on Psychology
Yeah,
Today."
that's
You know.
right. That's right.
So,
Change your mood with your food. Um,
yeah.
So I do keynotes really internationally. I focus mainly in the United States, but I travel abroad too. And I do keynotes both for corporations as well as nonprofit agencies. For example, I'll be in Arizona, in Sedona, in early October, I think the 13th, somewhere around there,
Hang on one second.
speaking
Can you
about.
tell the audience what a keynote speech is?
A keynote generally runs for an hour to an hour and 15 minutes. It depends on your purpose, but you're invited by a corporation or an agency. It could be a conference gathering where they want to hear your particular expertise. They want a little bit of levity, some lighthearted stories. They don't want a lot of statistics and boring PowerPoints. They want a little bit of an engaging, a motivating connection between you and the audience to share a message. And my message, as you can tell, is eat right to feel right,
Right.
improve your food, improve your mood. And so I teach across a broad variety of messages depending upon my audience and depending upon whether it's a general audience that's looking to get off coffee, sugar, white bread addiction, looking for more energy, looking to find more natural ways to boost their energy, to reduce pain. And those might be more general topics of discussion where I can share with people some approaches. or I may move towards along the spectrum of a more professional audience. Maybe they're professionals themselves, they're working with patients, they don't quite know a lot about integrative medicine or nutritional therapies because that's not their field, but they're interested. They're interested for themselves and their own health, and we know everybody starts really with their own health, but they want to help their patients or their clients improve as well. I work with school systems, for example, that are wanting to make changes in what students are exposed to in the school system. So it really depends on the audience, but generally it's about an hour to an hour and 15 minutes. There might afterwards be a breakout session, panels where I might sit as a member, where there's a smaller group of people that you can chat with about ideas, about how to make changes. That's generally what a keynote is about.
Got it. And how do you get these? Um,
Well, usually there are a variety of ways to get them. People hear about what you do. They read your book or they read your website, or it's word of mouth. Maybe someone saw you present and liked what you had to say, and someone else has written. There's also a much more formal way to do it, which I haven't had time, frankly, to do. I've been so busy, but people belong to speakers bureaus. That's a whole business in itself where you become an established speaker. Like, let's look at Hillary Clinton, who I think probably gets maybe $100,000 or $200,000 for a speech. I don't think I'm going to quite get there,
just
but
half of it.
yeah, yeah. So we have people, hopefully Michelle Obama's making a few pennies now, giving some speeches too after she recovers from 8 years of leading the country and eating better. So, but generally one gets paid anywhere from $3,000 to $10,000 for a speech. And that, of
Wow.
course, is determined. Now, then you get your mega speakers
Sure.
who
Yeah.
might get 20 or 30, or as I say, Hillary Clinton or others of that level. But it really depends also on who's hiring you, Microsoft or
So you don't have some
Intuit.
big outreach program where you're emailing Microsoft saying, "Hey, will you come let me speak about nutrition? This is what I charge." So really it all comes back to that, getting the exposure, getting on the radio, having the book, getting other speeches. It's just getting out there, establishing yourself as an expert. Then kind of once all these pieces are in place, stuff kind of starts flowing to you as opposed to, so it's like you put in all of the hard work for making no money on a book, but then other opportunities start happening because you're recognized as an expert and people start to know who you are. And that's really
Exactly.
how you're getting these. Wow. Okay, that's good to
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Now, some people, and I think the model that you're describing is very much how I do it. Some people do only speaking. And what you'll
Hmm.
see in our business model is that when someone reaches a certain place, they often stop taking on patients. And I've had people say to me, "Oh, forget the patients now. Just keep focusing on this and focus on that." And I go, "Well, I love working with patients. I don't see 30 or 40 patients a week like I used to, but I don't want to lose that connection with the one on one and helping individuals and families." But you will see that some people devote a full time career to just giving speeches. And as you can see, it's quite lucrative. But also, it involves a lot of travel. And I've done a lot of travel. There's no love lost between me and travel.
Yeah.
Travel's no fun anymore. And so it may be for someone who hasn't done it. But having done quite a bit of it, I'm very fussy about where I travel and to give a speech these days. So I don't need to have a full on speaking career. I can pick and choose my speeches.
Right. It's an interesting business model, and how that all works. It's just something that I haven't had any exposure to with respect to that. And I want to hit on some of the other stuff you do because you do a lot of stuff. So you see patients, which we hit on. You write books. You do keynote speeches. Another thing. So you created an online school, and I looked into it. There's a couple free courses and there's a paid course. So what made you want to create an online school, and how'd you do it? Because I'm guessing you're not a web developer, and most people who have a course, they would think about like, creating an online program. What do I do? So what was your whole theory behind doing
Yeah.
this, and what is it that about?
Yeah, we're just getting going with it too. I wanted to kind of test it out, see what it was like. I do teach online for Capella University. That's one of my other passions. I teach mental health counseling to up and coming counselors. I oversee their fieldwork internship. I do this full time. I sit on the IRB committee. I love evaluating research. I've got doctoral students. So that's another piece that I love because I also work with a very diverse group of students. But that's another area of my interest. So when I wanted to stop traveling so much and stop responding to requests to give a seminar in Seattle or in Boston or Cincinnati, I thought, let me put this online. We've now fully engaged and embraced the online capacity. I was ready for that in the jungle years ago. I'm glad technology has caught up to what I would like to do, which is teach online and transform my content into digestible bites that can educate people. And so I had to study the pedagogy, the study of learning, and how learning online is very different than when we're in person together. I then also researched the many, many portals, and I actually decided on the Teachable portal. I spent months researching the pros and cons of each, and I really love the Teachable portal. I've also used the Moodle, I think, Moodle portal as
Is
well.
that like the software that you put your
It's
courses
it's
on? And
kind of a cloud-based portal
got
that
it.
allows you to do very user-friendly upload of your videos, of your documents. And so I wanted to also, because I work with both the general audience, clients who may not have a lot of background in nutrition, but I also work with very sophisticated nutritional therapists who want to learn about mental health. I adjusted two courses to address those two different markets. Now, again, from a business point of view, some people would say, oh no, just focus on one. But I wanted to reach both. And then I wanted to give them a taste of it. I wanted to give them a flavor. I really wanted to share information. And then if they want to learn more, I just posted an hour-long course that also has recipes and checklists and additional information that people can pay a little bit of money for. And that's for nutritional therapists, that's for professionals to learn from. And so the jury, again, is still out on this. We're just launching, and probably over the next 6 months, we'll continue to launch. For many years, I ran a certificate program that led to a master's degree. As you well know, I think we met at the NTA conference,
Yep.
didn't we?
Yep.
And I began very early working with Greg Graham, an amazing business visionary, and working in the early stages of the nutritional therapy program and taught in it and really loved their model and worked with them actually to develop some of the distant model concept that they now use predominantly. And so I love their model, and we may be doing some work together around certification. In the past, what I did, because I've allied myself with universities that are accredited to give a master's degree, we would provide the content and the study and the mentorship for a number of courses that became a certificate in mental health nutrition and in traditional medicine and in ethnobotany, a variety of different topics. And then that certificate sat inside the requirements for a master's degree. So
Oh,
now
nice.
what we've done is we backed off from the masters a little bit just because academia remains in the 19th century a lot of the time, and we wanted to move faster than they could. And so now we're redeveloping our certificate in mental health nutrition for professionals who really want solid education and clinical mentorship in developing a niche in really an exploding field. I think it's the next revolution, and that's why your work and the products that you have is so central to that as well.
Right. And I like to ask this question is to everyone. As you look back on your whole career, you've done so many different things. What would you say is the one biggest single business challenge that you have faced?
I think the biggest challenge has been being underfunded in the projects that I've wanted to do and in the goals that I've had. I didn't have venture capital funding. Um, and so I've got many more ideas, and I still have unfinished projects just for lack of resources to put them into play. I'll tell you the one thing that I did, and this may be of interest to our audience. One of the things I also learned, and this is kind of the Robin Hood Maid Marian approach, where you earn from where you can to pay for what's not being paid for. Sometimes we can sell a product or do something that is very hot and people want to do it, but you also want to be doing something that no one's interested in. Maybe it's before it's time. And I think the challenge has been I've often been before the time, before things have hit their peak. And so it's often been very hard to fund it. But one of the things that I did was I took a little time out from a lot of the work I was doing, and I applied to the National Institutes of Health to conduct a research project in mind body medicine because I've also been interested in the science of what we do. And so I found that I wanted to deliver healthcare to communities that didn't have money to pay for it. I didn't have enough money to do what it took to do what my vision said. And so I thought, let's let the federal government fund research to do this. And so I was able to parlay a six-figure grant, a large grant to conduct scientific research in order to deliver a mind body intervention into communities that wouldn't have had it. And so there's another example, I think, just how I've dealt with like, how am I going to fund this? I don't have the money. No one's interested in making money off of this. And there's really nothing to be made off of anyway. It's not like I had something to sell per se. And so I think the way we deal with not having what we need, and in this case, my biggest challenge, being underfunded to produce something, is to get very creative. And that was another example of what we did to deliver what we needed, and it led to other things like you mentioned the funnel approach. One thing
Yeah.
will lead to another.
Yeah, it's funny with the underfunding. I just totally agree with you in my experience. I remember when I started my nutrition advisor, and I got my MBA and took a lot of entrepreneurship courses in, and I remember hearing like, however much you think you need, just double it, right? And so I'm like, well, whatever. I got a master's in finance, but I still doubled it, right? And even though I was really high in my estimate, and then here's what my suggestion is to people: whatever you need, multiply it. Whatever you think you need, multiply it times 4. Because here's the thing:
Mm-hmm.
to launch, double it, right? But then
Mm-hmm.
what I didn't understand is whatever you launch, it's not going to be right, just guaranteed. But you have to get it out there because then you're going to find out what's wrong, right? And then if you spend all your money in launching it and then find out what's wrong, then you're sitting on, I know what's wrong, right? Like with my nutrition advisor, when we launched that, our packaging was bad and we had coconut palm sugar in the product. We needed to change our packaging and we needed to get rid of the coconut palm sugar. We had no money to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sitting on all this inventory because that's where all of our initial investment went. And now we got to sell inventory that's not selling to get the money to fix the problem. Right? It just made no sense, and it delayed us by a year to get somewhere. And then the other lesson I learned was, like we've been talking about, I thought the best product at the best price would make something sell. And since then, I heard someone say that just take 75% of your budget and set that aside for marketing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as he said that, I thought, I've probably had like a 10% marketing budget, just thinking that the product's going to get me somewhere. And when he said that, I thought, boy, you're right. Just right off the bat, just set that aside because you're going to need it, right? You're going to have to go to conferences that you're going to have to pay for and buy vendor booths, and it's not just going to sell off the shelf. But anyway, I can feel the exact challenge that you have faced and have experienced it and still experience it.
Yes, and I'll add one thing to what you said, not only money, but time. We always underestimate the amount of time something is going to take. It's like it grows and it bubbles up. And because we learn as we're doing it, and we learn what we didn't know. And so not only is money exponential, but time is exponential. The amount of time something is going to take.
Yeah, sorry, I just got to tell one more story on that. So
Okay.
Dr. John, my cousin, and I had proposed our product to a large grocery store chain, and they wanted it, and they basically cut us a PO, and this was in July, I think, and they said, well, when are you going to ship it by? And I'm like, we'll have it to you by October. The following October is when we had it. Like, that's how far off I was. I'm like, we'll have it to you in 4 months. And it literally took 16 months to get it there. Like, I was off by 4x in terms
That's
of
a good
time.
lesson you learn when you give the month. You just never give the year.
Yeah, there you go. That's the lesson for today. Give months, not years.
Right, the delivery date, October.
Right. All right. Well, Dr. Korn, thank you so much for joining us in this interview series. It's been great having you and learning from you.
Great chatting with you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you.